It's about that time to get started. Welcome, everyone, to our debate today on the Bush Doctrine, probably one of the most important issues within the political right and a key division between libertarian and conservative thinkers. My name is Brian Kaye, and I am an opinion writer for the Orange County Register and a senior fellow at the Pacific Research Institute. And I'm not going to speak very much today. I'm here to listen, much like you are, on this very, very important issue. And we have two very, very distinguished guests. To my far left, we have Mr. Hornberger, who is here today, and he's the president of and founder of the Future of Freedom Foundation. He was born and raised in Laredo, Texas, and received his BA in economics from Virginia Military Institute and his law degree from the University of Texas. I know we have some other University of Texas people here as well. And he'll be here telling you why he does not believe in the Bush Doctrine. And then we also have, to my direct left, Bob Kaufman, who's a professor at Pepperdine University at the School of Public Policy at Pepperdine. He's written 3 books, including an award-winning book on Henry M. Jackson, and literally, he wrote the book In Defense of the Bush Doctrine, which he thought at the time would land him a spot in the Witness Protection Program. Our debate format today is each of our 2 debaters will come up here and give a 10-minute introduction, then we'll followed by a 5-minute rebuttal from each, and then we'll open it up to questions from all of you in the audience. There's a microphone right here in front of me, directly in front of me, and there's another microphone right over here. So when we get to the question and answer portion of the debate, I'd ask that you get in line fairly quickly and keep the questions concise, and we appreciate that. So without further ado, let's get our debate underway, and I'd like to ask that John Hornberger come up to the stand.
You know, conservatives used to like to point to the fact that Ronald Reagan brought down the Soviet Union by making it spend its way into bankruptcy, making it spend so much money that the government and the nation essentially went broke. You don't hear conservatives making that point very often these days, and the reason is because the principle applies right here in the United States as well. And everybody's becoming aware of that problem. At the Future of Freedom Foundation, we've been talking about it for 21 years. We've been saying this is a bad road this country's headed down. This is a bad road where the big government advocates, the advocates of the warfare state, of the U.S. empire, of the welfare state, are taking our nation down to uncontrolled spending, debt, inflation, and all that comes with that. And sure enough, that's where we are. And people are starting to figure out, finally, that this big spending problem is a big problem here in the United States. And they're starting to realize that that big spending comes from both the warfare state and the welfare state. And that big spending has consequences. I mean, we see it in terms of violations of financial privacy. We see it in terms of a voracious government that can't borrow enough. We see it, ironically enough, from the government borrowing from the very regime that contributed to the deaths of many people in my generation in the Vietnam War, a war that is still sacred to many of the big government conservatives. And yet they seem to find nothing wrong, nothing immoral, nothing reprehensible about going to one of the most brutal communist regimes in history, a regime that killed many U.S. soldiers in Southeast Asia, and borrowing the money to fund their imperialist adventures in their big warfare state. Now, if you think you're exempt from these problems, think again. Because when they need their money, they will get it. They will nationalize gold when the economic crisis comes, like Franklin Roosevelt, another big government advocate, did. They'll make it a felony offense to own the gold that you're buying here at this conference. They'll even nationalize your IRAs and your 401ks because those are nice, juicy targets, because that's what the Argentine government did when it ran out of its money. So this warfare state has consequences. Now, keep in mind also that this is a perpetual war. They themselves will admit it. They have admitted it, that this war goes on forever, this war on terrorism. I mean, from a standpoint of an advocate of big government, this is a dream come true. It's better than the Cold War, because, you know, the Berlin Wall might fall unexpectedly. It's better than the war on drugs. This thing goes on forever and ever and ever. In fact, I've written that it's the biggest terrorist-producing machine in history, this U.S. empire. It's an empire that's got bases, 700 to 1,000 bases in some 130 countries. It embargoes, it sanctions, it supports brutal dictators, it invades, it violates wars, it makes wars of aggression. This is socialist central planning on a worldwide basis. This is where you've got the U.S. government planning which dictators to support, which ones to oust, which ones to invade, which ones to... Is it any wonder why there's so much chaos and crisis? This is what central planning does. And what they do is they go and create these enemies with their bombs, their invasions, their embargoes. And they sometimes make light of it. For example, when Madeleine Albright, the UN ambassador to the United Nations, told 60 Minutes that sure, the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children from the brutal embargo were worth it. That was her words, worth it. Imagine that. And as they create this anger and rage with statements like that, not to mention the killings, then when the inevitable retaliation comes, they say, oh, the terrorists just hate us for our freedom and values. It has nothing to do with the fact that we've killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children or doing all kinds of other horrible things. It's only Americans that get angry when innocent people are killed on 9/11. But foreigners, oh no, they just hate us for our freedom and values. But when the terrorists were asked why they attacked the World Trade Center in 1993, before 9/11, when they attacked the USS Cole, the Kenya and Tanzania, the embassies there, the statement is consistent. It's because of what your government has done over here that we are retaliating against you. And that's what Ron Paul was making, that point, when he said to Giuliani, the reason they came over to here to kill us is because our government's been over there killing them. And then finally, we've got to keep in mind the cost to us as Americans, the loss of our freedom. Because with empire, militarism, embargoes, invasions, wars of aggression, comes the loss of liberty. This is what Madison said. Madison said, of all the enemies to liberty, our liberty, the greatest is war. Because that's when our government becomes the greatest threat to our freedoms. That's what Madison was saying. Because with wars comes armies and standing armies and debts, taxes, inflation, bureaucracy, centralization of power, the war on terrorism, socialism, and of course the nation-building exercise where they send these socialist projects in to rebuild the nations they destroyed. And all this while, we lose our freedoms. You've got the Patriot Act, where, you've got the power to issue search warrants that even King George would have been embarrassed to have. They sneak into people's homes, Americans' homes, and don't even tell them, and search, and never even notify them. They go into banks with national security letters that they write themselves. They don't even get a warrant. And it's all to search your records or records of your fellow Americans. It's remindful of that old quote, I think it was Cardinal Newman, that said first they came for the communists and they came for this group and this group and this group, but we all stayed silent until they came for us. Because you see, these people in this regime, in this warfare state, they have the power now to take Americans into custody thanks to this warfare state imperial foreign policy. They have the power to seize us, cart us away as an enemy combatant in the war on terrorism. No judicial process. It is the ultimate in tyranny. This is the power that these U.S.-supported dictators in the Middle East have. The power that people are rebelling against, that they're asking to lift. The power to take any American into custody, cart him away, torture him, indefinitely incarcerate him, or even assassinate him, which is now the power that they've self-assumed. This is not a good road we're on. This is not a road. If you're interested in freedom, there is no way you're going to find it under a welfare, warfare, imperial state. And this is what we've been arguing for 21 years. You want a free society, then you've got to dismantle this thing. You got to bring all the troops home. Discharge them. Cold War's over. Bring them home from Germany. Get them out of Japan. They don't want them in Japan anyway. Bring them out of Korea, South America, where they're being used as cops in the drug war. Bring them all home and discharge them. Close all those bases, including Guantanamo Bay. liberate the American people, liberate the private sector, you